Real quick, before I start this video, all of my sources will be linked in the description. One of the links is to a Google Docs drive that contains all the information. As well, some of the hard files that you can download. They are available everywhere else on the internet, but you can also just manually download the sources through the links I'll provide in the description and just go through them. But otherwise, those are my sources. I'm mostly just putting that there so you guys can see my spreadsheets, so that you guys can know I'm not manipulating this. This is all verifiable. You can go through and double check me. I gave it a pretty good look through, same with everything else I've been doing, but of course I am one person, and I don't have access to a bunch of peers in my circle who can just waste 4 or 5 hours looking into everything, so I'll let you guys be the judge. That's kind of the point of everything, isn't it? Let's get on with the video. At JwilliamJ. Everything I've done since your response was done to gauge your willingness to have an authentic conversation. You see, the video, or should I say the intent behind it, was hard to gauge. I couldn't tell for the life of me whether you were simply doing what I was doing, which was a couple quick Google searches to express my doubts and where they come from, or maybe if your intentions were more malicious. Needless to say, I tried to put our political differences aside. I put my heart out there to show you and my audience what went through my head and what I was seeing in hopes we both come to, if not in agreement and understanding. I posted relentlessly, not trying to tag you, but I did post relentlessly my entire progress, hoping you would react in some way, just to show whether you were a rival or an opponent. And since I can't gauge your intentions, I am yet again forced to take everything literally. My first grievance comes with how you chose to interpret my video. As I previously claimed, I was literally just being a technical head, showing mostly that you can't gauge efficiency of firearm control through gun deaths per capita alone, because more than half were criminal uses, and then even then more so, a certain percentage were logically going to be defensive use of a firearm, which is not only legal, but arguably proper use of a firearm. This then led me to ask way early in the video, why gun deaths? Why use gun deaths?
Gun deaths. Why?
You see, claiming gun legislation lowers gun deaths is annoying for the same reason that claiming restrictions on Ford cars reduces the amount of Ford-related car accidents. Because yeah, you would be correct, but the prophecy itself is self-fulfilling, and misses the point entirely. No there'd be less Ford-related car accidents. You both made it harder for Ford to produce cars and for people to get them. Car accidents as a whole will still happen at a similar rate. All you've done is change which cars are being used. Just like how Ford is one manufacturer of cars, guns are only one type of weapon, one means of committing suicide, and one expensive means of accomplishing mass death. I think this concept would be one you understand, because in your response, you use the same argument with the other guy's homicide statistic.
Homicide rate, this is like, homicide's like a murder, right? Yeah, no, his data's off.
Yeah, in your video, you claim that total gun deaths per capita is an irrelevant statistic, but what you're looking at is a list of states and territories by intentional homicide rate. That's not telling you if a gun's involved.
So why doesn't that apply here? Why focus on the firearm? Next, you started the first video by making the claim that, of course, California had more active shooter incidents.
Because maybe, just maybe, there's more people in California than any other state, thus more opportunities for active shooters.
On a state-by-state basis last year, they probably led in deaths in fucking every category.
Paraphrase, end quote. And went on for most, if not half the video, talking about per capita, which then prompted me to account for mass shootings per capita. Funnily enough, you never answered the question, and instead accused me of purposefully narrowing your argument when the simpler explanation was, I don't know, that I was talking about the only two topics brought up by the tweet and your video. Furthermore, in response, you reference an FBI report on active shooters, jumping between the two terms active shooter incidents and mass shootings without properly defining them. And in that process, you incorrectly claim that California had 6 mass shootings in 2021.
Incidents from last year. California did lead the way with 6, but not only would I argue that having 6 mass shootings in the state with the most people is not indicative that strict gun laws do not work. That point is backed up with the fact that states like Georgia and Texas, 2 states with higher populations but laxer gun laws than California, had 5 active shooter instances.
Then you end up conveniently missing the absolute bombshell, which was that in 2021, Texas was able to thwart every single mass shooting attempt made that year, and that Georgia thwarted all but one. Meaning that in 2021, Georgia and Texas combined stopped as much mass shootings in 2021 than total successful mass shootings in Oregon and Washington since 1982. Hey, this isn't post, but I just thought I'd also bring up that this also means that Georgia and Texas, whose population is very similar to California's, it's actually got more population, had half the mass shootings, one less mass shooting than California. So they had less mass shootings combined than California had in 2021. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Later on in your section on the FBI report, you also bring up New York, which is pretty low on mass shootings and active shooters in 2021. You pass off New York because they have similar gun restrictions, yet much less lower stats across the board. You didn't know it at the time, but they also have a lower violent crime rate. Did you ever start to think as to maybe why that is? What do you think maybe separates New York from California? If you said militarized police, you'd be 100% correct. Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, New Jersey, Connecticut, and New Hampshire all have at least a police station for every 200 square miles. All of those states perform among the best for violent crime rates. New Hampshire only being drastically outshined by a state that not only has a higher rate of gun ownership and less police density, but more than triple the gun owners per square mile. Maine. This case is only amplified when every single state with 0.1 gun owners per square mile, with the exception of Alaska and New Mexico, has a violent crime rate of around 500 or lower, and every state with a gun ownership rating above 58% has a violent crime rate below 500. Again, excluding Alaska. The data here is clear. There is a drastic positive correlation between states with either high gun ownership, no matter how you measure it, dense militarized police, or both, and the safety of citizens in those states. Now you see, California is unique because it has neither what I would consider to be a healthy police density nor a healthy gun ownership rate, which is probably why, despite having a low crime rate overall, the state chronically has high-intensity mass shootings. Not only does the state have the most since 1982, but in the year 2021, it ranks highest for most deaths from mass shootings in that year. 13, 16 if you count the deaths from failed attempts, which is more than the maximum deaths that every attempt in Texas could possibly have had that same year, as well as slightly less deaths than active shooter injuries in Texas that year, which was 14 injuries. All this to drill in just how intense the problem is in California. By the way, since per capita is important to you, more people died per capita in California from active shooter events, 16 people died over 40 million, than Texas and Georgia combined, which had 13 deaths among 41 million people. This is me in post. I feel like I should bring this up. The FBI paper defines a mass shooting as 3 or more people dead in an incident. I feel like I should point that out now because I don't think I pointed it out in this recording, and I know a lot of people aren't going to go physically check the FBI document. They're just going to go with the standard operating measurement, which is 4 or more dead. The FBI measures it differently. It's 3 or more dead. So there's that. Especially since this is a big chunk of this paragraph is just a bunch of that. I figured I'd bring it up just to keep you aware. In 2021, as per your own FBI source, you get the point. California is a big problem, whether you want to admit it or not. The final nail in the coffin, to wrap this up like your least favorite Christmas in June gift, Australia's gun buyback program had no measurable impact when examining the graph shown by Vox here. Notice that suicide was already on the decline. Or on suicide overall here. 3 years, or for something to stop working, temporarily. Nor did any gun legislation have any measurable, desirable impact on homicide in Canada. Note the spike in 1996 and 2019 to 2020, which has only been amplified with the printing of firearms actually becoming a rising problem in Canada. See the YouTube link to Abbott and Preach's video. You heard me correct. Criminals in Canada are illegally printing firearms to commit violent crimes against the disarmed, practically defenseless populace of Canada, meaning that the disarming of Canadians actually forced them to become victims of these violent crimes against their will. But none of this matters, because I have the God-given natural right, nay, the obligation, to defend myself in the best manner technology can provide against any and all threats against myself, my family, or my community. No matter how much you dislike that, there isn't a god thing wrong with me using my firearms as a tool to tell any nut jobs that any and all attempts to harm those that I care about, that they better be willing to die trying. Have a good day.